So there was a new poll out this week. I believe it was conducted by Politico. And in the poll, it says Canadians now say the United States is a bigger threat than Russia. I don't know about that, but I would love to know what you guys think. So, as always, I would love to know your thoughts. So, please feel free to join the chat, jump in at any time, and yeah, what do you think? And we will take a look at this poll because it wasn't just Canada that was polled, but a few other countries as well. I believe the United Kingdom and Germany. I have some statistics for those countries as well. So we will take a look at this. So yeah, my first note was who conducted the poll. The headline statistic that Canadians see the United States as a bigger threat than Russia comes from a poll released by Politico in early February 2026. It was conducted in partnership with the UK-based research firm Public First, which surveyed thousands of adults, including in Canada, the US, Britain, France, and Germany, to compare views on global threats and allies. This isn't a small online poll. It's backed by professional pollsters with a broad international sample, though you'll often see the Canadian slice highlighted. And what question was asked? Respondents were asked to assess which country they view as a greater threat to world peace or to their own country's security. In the Canadian portion of that survey, 48% of Canadians picked the United States, a higher share than those who chose Russia as their top threat. The results are part of a broader questioning about whether Canada still sees the US as an ally, how reliable allies are, and which foreign powers are seen as threats globally or regionally. The key comparison of US versus Russia. In this specific poll, Canadians were asked to think broadly about which country poses a bigger threat to global peace. Nearly half of Canadians said the United States, while fewer, around 29%, named Russia as the top threat, despite Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine and traditional role as a geopolitical rival. That reversal, seeing a long-standing democratic ally as a greater danger than a country engaged in a large-scale military conflict, is what makes this finding newsworthy. What threat means in this context. In opinion polling, threat can span different dimensions, not just military aggression. In this case, the term covers economic, political, and security concerns, including economic pressure, fears about tariffs and trade disputes that directly impact Canadian industries and jobs, political unpredictability, Canadian perception that U.S. actions under the current administration are unstable or self-interested, security concerns, a sense that the U.S. might not act as a reliable partner in crises or that its policies could indirectly make the world less stable. So when Canadians say the U.S. is a threat, it isn't saying the U.S. is about to invade Canada militarily. It's expressing a perception that U.S. actions could undermine Canadian interests economically, politically, or on the global stage. This poll isn't measuring military invasion fears. It's tracking how Canadians see risk to peace and stability from different global powers. So let's pull up the actual from Politico itself. I will find it here. Just give me a second. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Hold on a second, guys. I will find it. Yes, I should have had it ready, I know. I will get it here, guys. Share screen. Is this it? Yes, okay. So I think that should be sharing there now. And okay. It's still not coming up on screen. What's going on here? Oh, there we go. Finally. That took quite a while for it to finally. Odd headline. Look how much Canadians hate the United States now. But we will take a closer look at this Politico article. It's not just about the trade war. Nearly half of America's neighbors to the north now think the U.S. is a bigger threat to world peace than Russia. Elbows up, Canada. My opinion is that's a retarded saying. It's the world's most awkward breakup. More than a year after U.S. President Donald Trump casually joked about absorbing Canada and repeatedly threatened debilitating tariffs on its goods, many Canadians are convinced their former pals to the south have lost the plot. New results from the Politico poll suggest a lasting chill has settled over the world's former bosom buddies. Americans are rosy as ever about their northern neighbors, but Canadians don't share the love. Their message to America: it's not us, it's you. I'm not going to lie, I have used that exact line breaking up before. It's not me, it's you. Canadians don't see Trump's America as merely an annoyance. The survey found they consider the superpower next door the world's greatest threat to peacetime. The Politico poll, in partnership with UK polling firm Public First, finds Canadians increasingly view the United States as a source of global volatility instead of a stabilizing ally. And what I actually wanted to get to, here's the actual poll results. And they have it broken down into several different categories, I guess is what we will call them. And I'm not sure if you can see that on your screen, but I'll just kind of read it as well. I guess it depends. If you're watching this on a TV, then you can probably see it. If you're watching it on your smartphone, then you probably can't see it. That's a very small screen. But so share of Canadian adults split by party who agree or disagree that the United States is a reliable ally. And overall, 58% disagree. And 70% liberals disagree. New Democratic 62% disagree. And conservatives 41%, which I thought was even high for conservatives. I would think more conservatives would see the United States as a reliable ally. And then moving down to the next category, actually here's the breakdown. So share of adults from each country who say the US, China, Russia, or the EU represent the biggest threat to peace. And Canada has the US at 48%. Germany has Russia at 56%. France has Russia at 55%. And the United Kingdom has Russia at 53%. So Germany, United Kingdom, and France all in that 55% range. And then Canada has Russia at 29%. Now, I guess, too, that is also the geography. Like, Canada is next door to the United States, whereas Germany, UK, and France are a lot closer to Russia than Canada is, even though if you look at, our northern borders and the Arctic, then we're actually quite close to Russia as well, but people never think about that. Share of adults from each country who say the US, China, Russia, or the EU represent the biggest threat to peace. Is that what is it not the exact same poll that we just looked at right here? It is. Okay, they just put the same thing in twice. This next one, share of Canadian adults who either say it's better to depend on China or the US under Donald Trump. It is better to depend on China. 57% say that. It is better to depend on the US under Donald Trump. 23% say that. So more people are favoring China than the US under Donald Trump. And I think there was a couple more down here too. A share of Canadian adults who say Donald Trump has made the relationship between Canada and the US weaker or stronger. So weaker, though it will recover after he is gone, 49%. Weaker and it will not recover, 29%. Stronger, 7%. Donald Trump has no impact, 7%. So I think most people are just waited out for 3 more years and Trump will be gone, is kind of I think not just Canada, that's sort of probably the global sentiment. There was one other one that I thought I had seen earlier when I was looking this up, but because it showed a very high percentage of conservatives in one of these that I thought was very interesting. It's not that one. Did I miss one up here somewhere? No, that was the whole article. Okay. Okay, well, we'll just leave that for now. And we'll jump into some X comments here momentarily as well. But there are a few more key points that I wanted to do during my research. China is the threat. Freaking China is the threat. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you that, China is probably the bigger threat to Canada than either the US or Russia. But yeah, like I said, I'm always interested to know people's thoughts in the comments. So feel free to jump in at any time and join the chat. It's always fun. So the next few things, like in my notes that I was making up earlier, not making up, that I was, I guess, researching earlier, trade wars and tariff threats, why economics feels like a security issue. Canada's economy is deeply tied to the US, and that makes trade disputes feel immediate and personal. Recent years have shown that tariffs can be imposed quickly, long-standing trade rules can be reopened, Canada can be targeted even as an ally. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, softwood lumber, or autos don't just affect corporations, they hit jobs, prices, regional economies. Okay, freaking, we have another comment. Also, no one talks about India taking over silently. Yeah, that is very true as well. I mean, is it really that silent? You know, when you walk into any Tim Hortons, or you try to stroll through the streets of Brampton or Surrey, and it's all Indians. So yeah, I do definitely get where you're coming from there, freaking. I appreciate that comment. Okay, let's jump back into where I was. Why this shapes threat perception. Russia's actions affect Canada indirectly. U.S. trade actions can hurt Canada tomorrow morning. When your biggest customer threatens tariffs, it feels like diplomacy, and it feels less like diplomacy and more like leverage. Number 2 in these points, political unpredictability in Washington. Stability matters more than friendship. Canadians are used to differences with the U.S., but not wild swings. So what's changed? Policies can reverse after elections. Allies are treated transactionally. Longstanding norms are openly questioned. From a Canadian perspective, unpredictability is risky because Canada builds long-term policy around U.S. stability. Sudden changes create economic and diplomatic whiplash. It's not hostility that worries Canada, it's volatility. Uncertainty is harder to plan around than disagreement. Number 3, economic dependence on the U.S. When closeness becomes vulnerability, about 3/4 of Canada's exports go to the United States. That means supply chains are intertwined, border disruptions ripple instantly. Canada has limited leverage in disputes. This dependence creates anxiety. Canada can't easily walk away. Diversification takes decades. One U.S. decision can impact multiple Canadian sectors. And why this feeds the poll result. The more dependent you are on someone, the more their instability feels threatening. When one partner dominates your economy, their choices matter more than anyone else's. 4th point, declining trust in long-term reliability. The emotional core of the shift. For decades, Canadians assumed the U.S. would act predictably. And yeah, we've seen in the last year the unpredictability coming out of the Trump administration, and not just Canada, the entire world has witnessed the unpredictability of the Trump administration. So alliances were durable, disputes would be managed quietly. That assumption has weakened. Canadians increasingly ask, Will the U.S. respect agreements long term? Will it prioritize allies or only itself? And I think we know the answer to that is it will prioritize itself, especially with the MAGA movement and the America First, Make America Great movement. Definitely prioritizing itself. And can Canada count on consistency beyond one administration? And this is the heart of that poll result, not fear, but doubt. This isn't about panic, it's about confidence eroding. So now in my next points, kind of moving away from some of the reliance of Canada-US trade and more about Russia and why the US is seen as more of a threat than Russia. So first, Russia equals military risk abroad, serious but distant. For most Canadians, Russia represents a traditional security threat, military aggression, war in Ukraine, nuclear rhetoric, cyber and disinformation risks. But for Canada, the risk is largely overseas, mediated through NATO and allies, and it's unlikely to directly affect daily life in Canada. Canadians see Russia as dangerous, but not immediately disruptive to their economy or daily stability. Russia is a serious threat, but a faraway one. And then going back to the US is economic and political leverage at home. Close, constant, and unavoidable. The United States has influence over Canada not through force, but through leverage, which includes trade access, border control, regulatory decisions, political pressure, because the US is Canada's largest trading partner. Its decisions directly affect jobs, prices, and growth. Pressure doesn't feel theoretical. It feels personal. And the key contrast, Russia can threaten Canada's interests abroad. The US can shape Canada's reality at home. The US doesn't need tanks to affect Canada. It has access. Yeah, that is so very true. And then the next point in this segment is the ongoing tariffs. And we did see earlier this week that the US Supreme Court voted against or made a decision that basically shot down all of Trump's tariffs. And then what did Trump do? Immediately put 10% tariffs on every single country in the world. So the fastest way to feel the impact. Tariffs are imposed quickly, politically motivated, difficult to counter. And when tariffs hit, factories slow or shut, workers lose hours or jobs, prices rise for consumers. Canadians remember steel and aluminum tariffs, softwood lumber disputes, and threats against autos. And it's always those three sectors, right? Steel and aluminum, softwood lumber, and the auto sector. Those are all, because those are the ones that aren't covered in CUSMA or prior to that, NAFTA. They've never been covered. So there's all under those trade agreements, under the free trade agreements. So steel and aluminum tariffs, softwood lumber disputes, and threats against the auto industry have always been key threats, key problems from the Canadian perspective, and why this feeds threat perception. Tariffs hurt specific communities, not abstract policy goals. Tariffs are economic weapons, and Canada has felt them before. And then continuing with this thought process, supply chains, how disruption spreads instantly. Canada and the US share deeply integrated supply chains in auto manufacturing, energy, agriculture, and retail goods, and so many more. We all know this. Disruptions, even temporary ones, can shut down factories, create shortages, and spike costs. Unlike Russia, the US sits inside Canada's economic bloodstream. If the US, and yeah, I'm sure we've all heard this saying before, when the US sneezes, Canada catches the cold. Border disruption, where politics meet daily life. The Canada-US border is essential for trade, critical for tourism, central to supply chains. Border slowdowns or closures delay goods, hurt businesses, disrupt travels. Canadians saw this during pandemic restrictions, security crackdowns, and political disputes. The border is normally invisible, so when it becomes a problem, people notice fast. The border is peaceful until it isn't. And then we have a lot of history too, sort of between Canada and the US. Obviously, we know there's a couple hundred years of history here between our two nations. Post World War II alliance, the foundation of trust. After the Second World War, Canada and the United States built one of the closest alliances in modern history, which includes joint defense through NATO, continental security via NORAD, intelligence sharing, deep economic cooperation. For decades, Canadians believed the US would defend shared democratic values. Disagreements would be managed quietly. The alliance was stable and predictable. And the key takeaway, the US wasn't just an ally, it was a part of Canada's security system. And then we move into the NAFTA era of cooperation, economic integration without fear. The NAFTA era, starting in the 1990s, marked a golden age of economic cooperation. It brought integrated supply chains, predictable trade rules, cross-border investment, and rising prosperity. Even when disputes happened, they followed agreed rules. Retaliation was limited. Cooperation remained the default. And why this mattered psychologically, trade felt safe and rules-based, not political or punitive. Disagreements existed, but the system felt fair. Recent erosion of trust, from partnership to uncertainty. In recent years, that sense of stability has weakened. What has changed? Tariffs imposed by allies, threats to rewrite or abandon agreements, public attacks on partners, transactional America first framing. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments, jump up in the chat and let me know what you think about this poll that has come out from Politico that says Canadians now see the US as a bigger threat to world peace or to global peace than Russia. Honestly, I don't know if I can agree with that. Although when I was having a chat earlier today with a friend of mine who is just across the border in Ohio, and I told her about this poll, and she was like, "Yeah, makes sense. Traditionally, countries do get invaded by their neighbors. Like historically, countries do get invaded by their neighbors." So she was like, "I could see why Canadians would feel that way or think that way." And yeah, she actually had some other kind of fun. Let me see if I can find it. I'm not going to pull it up on screen, but if I can just read it to you, what she said. Where I just have it here. It is here. I know I have it here somewhere. Okay, she said, "I mean, I'd have to agree, LOL. Countries typically get invaded by their neighbors, and literally the US is emotionally unstable and manic, so you really never know what you're going to get." That's coming from an American. And I don't know for a fact, but I would guess she's probably more Democrat than Republican. That's just my guess. I've never really talked to her very much about what her political stance is. And her and I have been online friends for years, over 5 years. We've chatted back and forth about all sorts of things. So I just thought her saying that to me when I was telling her about the topic for today's live stream, I thought her response was kind of amusing, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure where I was in my notes, but I think this isn't about one policy, it's about reliability over time. The rules didn't disappear, confidence in them did. And why this feels new for Canadians, a psychological shift, not just a political one. For most of modern Canadian history, the US was a known quantity. Even when disliked, it was dependable. What feels new is uncertainty about future behavior, fear of sudden reversals, loss of the assumption that things will work themselves out. Canadians aren't used to questioning the relationship itself. That's why the poll is striking. Canadians are rethinking something they used to take for granted. And that is the end of my notes. So at this point, again, I would like to invite anyone and everyone to jump up in the chat. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I am going to also pull up, everybody who has watched any of my live streams know that I love to share what I see on X, the posts there. I find them always, if not informative, at least entertaining, I guess. So that's, I'm going to even refresh it there before I pull it up just so we can get the latest. And I did search, how did I word the search? US bigger threat to Canada. Okay, so let me try to find this here again quickly, guys. Share screen, share screen. You got to click share screen on this like 5 times to actually get it to share. And there we go now. Okay. So again, hopefully if you're watching this like on TV, you will be able to see this. And if you're watching on a small phone, on a smartphone, the screen will be too small. But okay, so from 2 hours ago, at Kyung, 2,000 followers. Trump has made Canada hate the United States. Trump has turned Canada against the United States to the point where Canadians view the US as a bigger threat than Russia. And that leads, there's a link there to a Substack article. Sarah Reese Jones, 108,000 followers. Trump has turned Canada against the United States to the point where Canadians view the US as a bigger threat to Russia. Isn't that the exact same post? And then this is again the exact same post. Trump has turned Canada against the United States to the point where Canadians view the US as a bigger threat than Russia. Okay, hopefully this is something new here. Demetris, how many followers was that? 2,200. Look how much Canadians hate the United States now. It's not just about the trade war. Nearly half of America's neighbors to the north now think the US is a bigger threat to world peace than Russia, which was the line straight out of the Politico article. Nothing like doubling down. Stop shouting. 2,100 followers. Nothing like doubling down and choosing to make Canada an even bigger security threat to the US than it already is. I'm sure it will end well. Okay, that seems to be going the other way, calling Canada the security threat to the US. Canadians consider the US a bigger threat to world peace than Russia. Many Canadians don't view the US as an ally anymore. Canadians think US is a bigger threat than Russia. Politico survey. Canada has lost its mind thanks to the infiltration of EU political views. Reich Disruptor, 199 followers. R.K. Atkinson, 597 followers. It's worse than you think. And again, just the Politico. Paulo Pancho Canadiano. Canadians on average are better educated than Americans, and yes, Trump unfortunately is a bigger threat to Canada than China. Case in point, the US is in a trade war with Canada and funding a regime change operation against Canada to break up Canada. How is the US funding a regime change? Okay, some people are just too funny. Mark, 6,000 followers. I call BS. Canadians say U.S. no longer an ally is a bigger threat than Russia. So, Mark, yeah. William Fraser, unacceptable views, 295. Trump is in a pickle. Canada is a far bigger threat to the security of his country than Venezuela ever was. Carney is a weaselly little Chinese mole. We can only hope Trump acts to save us. North of 48, 112. Major news company in Canada says Canadians say U.S. no longer an ally is bigger threat than Russia. Poll says, what? Who? The actual propaganda is real. This does not represent me nor anyone I know. The CCP is its hands in Canada's pocket, and it needs to be cut off. And there's actually a screen grab from Global BC. Canadians say U.S. no longer ally is bigger threat than Russia, poll says. I'm just going to read a couple more of these because, like I said, I find the X posts, if not informative, at the very least entertaining. So Diane M., 198 followers. Unfortunately, Carney's government pays off our media to have people believe the U.S. is a bigger threat to us than China. I'm very concerned for our country, and I'm planning my exit. He is a CCP asset. I hope POTUS realizes when he says anything about Canada, Carney gets the media to bash U.S. more and further push us towards China. How close do you want the PRC to your doorstep? Okay, and Cranberry, 70 followers. Canada has become a major security threat to the U.S., even bigger than terrorists, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. You must send a liberation force in order to rescue us from this corrupt and treasonous radical left government. And he's tagged Elon there as well. Okay. Kimo, 77 followers. Look how much Canadians hate the United States now. So that's just directly from the Politico article. And then, yeah, so a lot of this is just repetition of the Politico article. Okay, well, thank you so much to Freakin for adding to the chat. I always say, you guys have heard me say it a million times, and I'm going to keep saying it. The live streams are 110% better when people join the chat. So always feel free to join the chat. And I do also want to a big thank you to everyone who has supported these live streams by sending a super sticker or super chat using the cash icon in the YouTube chat window. Obviously, it's never expected, but always appreciated. So thank you so much to everyone who has ever done that, or anyone who will do that in the future, will do so in the future. Never expected, always super, super, super appreciated. So thank you so much, as always. And of course, the obligatory YouTube like, comment, and subscribe. So if you are watching the replay of this, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And I think that will probably be where we end today's live stream. We're getting, well, we're already well over the half-hour mark. And again, I always set aside at least an hour of my time for these live streams. I am willing to go longer than an hour, but it all depends on you guys in the chat. I'll keep saying it. I'll keep repeating over and over again. When you join the chat, join the chat, and it makes the live streams so much more enjoyable for everyone, for the audience, for the viewer, for me. Having that interaction back and forth is truly what makes live streams very, very enjoyable. So, and honestly, guys, I thought this topic would get more viewers into the room, but it hasn't. I thought I do know this poll came out like a few days ago, several days ago, or a week ago. So maybe it's sort of yesterday's news and not as topical. But as always, thank you all so much for those of you who did join. Again, thank you so much to Freakin for the comments in the chat. And I will be back again tomorrow between 4:30 and 5, beginning between 4:30 and 5 every day, live streaming. That is the goal right now, to live stream every single day beginning between 4:30 and 5 Eastern time. And like I said, going for as long as I can through what I've pre-prepared, and then also going as long as I can with whatever comes up in the chat. So thank you all so much for joining today, and thank you. And I will see you again tomorrow.